A book is the best gift you can get, and therefore a book is the best gift you can give. So today I'm going to help you out with my ultimate book gifting guide for 2025. I'm going to give you 12 different books for 12 different readers to make it easy for you this year to be able to get someone in your life the best gift that you possibly can. Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Zach LaGreca. I talk about sci-fi, fantasy, horror, speculative fiction in general, and today we are going over my ultimate gift-giving guide for books for 2025 with 12 different recommendations that I think will help you triangulate in on some type of book for someone in your life that you'd like to give them a book. And I think that's great. A book is such a beautiful thing to give to someone. It's fun to get books and it's fun to give them. So I think I have some great recommendations, many of which you may not have heard of, some of which you'll be familiar with. But hopefully in this video I can not only give you some ideas of books you haven't heard of, but I can also give you some reasons for what type of reader might appreciate a given book. First up, we have Nivola by Paolo Bacigalupi. This is an intense read. It's a political, backstabby, twisty, turny, kind of grim, dark fantasy novel, but the fantasy elements are pretty light. So if you know someone who is a big fan of Game of Thrones, maybe they watch the show, and maybe they even read the Song of Ice and Fire series, and they like that type of read. They like the brutality. They like the intense political machinations. They like not knowing who's safe and who's not. They like just some of the general adult content that is present in A Song of Ice and Fire. I think you get a lot of those things in Nivola. This is the first book in a series. There will be more coming, but this was such a surprise hit for me last year, and not enough people know or talk about this book. It's also very well written. Bacigalupi has great prose. He's a very talented craftsman of a writer, so this is also a good pick for someone in your life who appreciates fantasy in a kind of pseudo-historical setting. So this is set in a time period that feels reminiscent of Renaissance Italy, which is another fun flavor. Like, it feels just a little bit different than Song of Ice and Fire for that reason as well. But if there's someone in your life who likes kind of light fantasy, historical fiction, political intrigue, and who also really appreciates someone who is skilled with their words and their phrases and their prose, then Nivola by Paolo Bacigalupi is going to be a great pick. Next up, we're going to go with a cozy fantasy novel, The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Long. If you know someone who loved Legends and Lattes, they love Travis Baldrey's work, or maybe they just like coziness and cute stuff in general, this is a great pick. Obviously, if they haven't read Legends and Lattes, but they love adorable creatures and very just positive, happy fantasy stories, Legends and Lattes is another good pick, but that's the pick that I think a lot of people have heard of. The Teller of Small Fortunes is a little bit more obscure, but reads similarly with a cast of cozy characters. It has found family elements, and the stakes are fairly low, but it is just a beautifully cozy little world. This is just like a warm hug of a book. Great to curl up by a fire and, sip some tea, something like that. It's not super long. So if you know somebody who likes coziness, who likes cute stuff, they don't like intense political, basically the opposite of the last thing. So if you know someone who it doesn't like the intensity in their fantasy, then this could be a good pick for them. Now here's one you have no doubt heard about at this point. Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. I'm still bringing this up as a recommendation because there are a lot of people in my circles who don't read a ton, but love video games and maybe have a slightly immature sense of humor. I think especially as a guy, like inevitably I have friends who fit that description. For those type of people, I think they're going to like Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you have that friend who still watches Family Guy and likes to play video games, particularly RPGs where they're leveling up the stats of a character, they're going to have a ton of fun with this. Now, other people might have fun with this too. This has become immensely popular. But yeah, Dungeon Crawler Carl follows a man named Carl who the whole world gets invaded by aliens suddenly, and most of the population is annihilated, and the rest of the planet is turned into a giant labyrinth or dungeon, and the remaining surviving humans are forced to become contestants in this dungeon and progress lower and lower to the final level to try and win this competition, and it's essentially being broadcast to aliens throughout the galaxy. So you can kind of tell it's absurd, it's over the top. The humor is a little hit or miss. Like sometimes I found it annoying or cringy. Sometimes it's legitimately funny. And again, I think for that type of person who likes Family Guy or likes video games, the leveling up stat element is a lot of fun. And I will say, as you continue the series, there's a little bit of heart to the series too. So there's a little bit more depth than you might originally think when you start this. But yeah, I recommend this as a good gift. Dungeon Crawler Carl. For somebody in your life who likes YA or likes more romantic elements in their fiction, I strongly recommend Strange the Dreamer. I personally don't read a ton of YA. It's not as much my genre, and I don't read a ton of romance or romantasy, but occasionally I like a good romantic story. And I think Strange the Dreamer is a really great romance fantasy story, but it's also a really great fantasy story, and it has a really evocative and beautiful world, and Laini Taylor has incredible prose. Like, she is a beautiful writer. And Strange the Dreamer is a really cool concept. It's about a city that used to have all the gods, and then all of the gods like had a war and died off. It's been a long time since I remember, but there's like this lost city of the gods, and there was some massacre amongst the gods. And Strange the Dreamer gets enlisted in a group of people who are going to try and find this lost city. And Strange the Dreamer is kind of an unlikely hero. He's a little shy, a little awkward, but he has a heart of gold, and he's an incredibly endearing protagonist. And again, this is just a beautiful fantasy world with beautiful writing. For the Stephen King fans in your life, I recommend King Sorrow by Joe Hill, because this book is a testament that the apple does not fall far from the proverbial tree. Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, is what I'm trying to say. And he is maybe as good as his dad at writing. If not, he's very close. And I think King Sorrow is a testament to that fact. This is an epic 900-page saga, and yet I wasn't bored once. I flew through this novel. And this is a coming-of-age story. This is a dark academia. This is a group of college students who summon a dragon to the mortal plane and accidentally get involved in kind of like a pact with this dragon that lasts the duration of their adult lives, where every year they have to pick a sacrifice for the dragon so it doesn't eat them. So I think anybody who likes Stephen King and likes the type of horror and fantasy elements that he brings to a kind of version of our real world, and who does coming of age and does really flawed characters well and looks at people over the span of their lives, I think they're gonna like King Sorrow. It's great. So if you love Stephen King, I think you're gonna love King Sorrow. So yeah, for the Stephen King fan in your life who hasn't yet dipped much into Joe Hill, this is it. For the reader in your life who likes horror but also really likes Western, I recommend Tom's Crossing by Mark Z. Danielewski, who is the author of House of Leaves, which is a very famous or infamous, depending on whether or not you like it, horror novel, very postmodern experimental horror novel. I'm forgetting, there's a term for this type of novel where the book uses like the physicality of the book as a means of artistic expression, where you're like, you have some pages are upside down and some are swirls and some barely have any text, and there's footnotes and appendices and diagrams, and it's crazy. But House of Leaves is great. I loved it. I think it's one of the most unsettling and interesting books I've ever read, and therefore I'm very intrigued by this. I haven't read this yet. Most of the books on this list I've read. This is one I have not read, but I'm confident because Danielewski is an incredibly accomplished writer, and what I have heard is that this book has elements of both horror and Western, and I think some coming of age as well. So I feel pretty confident recommending this. Like, again, if you know someone who likes horror and Westerns, this is going to be for them. If you have someone in your life who can't focus for more than 20 pages, 15, 20 minutes at a time, that's kind of me sometimes, unfortunately, I strongly recommend The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This is a collection of short stories written by Ken Liu. He also wrote The Dandelion Dynasty, which is an incredible... I've read the first book in that series and I love it. Ken Liu's a great writer, but his short fiction's very impressive because he will hit you with these 20, 30, 40-page short stories, and by the end of it, your heart's broken and you care about these characters and you get wrapped up in these crazy scenarios that make you think about the meaning of being human and the meaning of life and just what it means to try and exist and all of these existential questions. And he does a good job of tying in really interesting technological concepts, and at times he will cite like research studies of various technologies, which really gives a sense of verisimilitude. I'm not sure if that's how I pronounce that. Verisimilitude to his work. It just feels so real. And concrete. So it's kind of hard sci-fi. A lot of it's modern day. There's a couple of fantasy short stories in here as well. But yeah, this is beautifully written. Ken Liu is such an incredible writer. And these are great because like what I like to do is I'll read one short story a day. And kind of over the course of a month, I'll finish this collection. But yeah, so for someone who has a hard time focusing, I recommend The Paper Menagerie. For the Charles Dickens fan in your life, if someone loves David Copperfield, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver is essentially a retelling of David Copperfield, but it's set more modern day. It's set in the 1990s in the southern Appalachian Mountains, and it's kind of exploring David Copperfield's story, but as if it was dealing with a lot of the problems endemic to the southern Appalachian Mountains in the 90s. So economic problems, I think similar to Dickens' work, it is exploring economic issues and socioeconomic class struggles. But it's also looking at things like addiction and the foster care system and the way children of these situations are often left out high and dry and forced to fend for themselves, and the kind of problems that gives them and inevitably sets them up to fail, and so that they start to have these cycles that repeat, these awful cycles of abuse and neglect and violence and addiction that were inflicted unfairly upon them over time become things that they become party to because of all of that. And I think this is a really effective novel in that way. It explores that well. You will feel heartbroken by the end of this for Demon Copperhead, our titular character. And another thing Kingsolver does really interestingly is her character voice in this, her authorial voice, and the way she makes her character feel like such a specific person is so strong. Like, it really feels like this kid from Appalachia in the way he talks. And sometimes that can almost be a little annoying, but it feels so real. And you feel like you know him. And by the end, you love this kid. And you love him, and you hate him a little bit because of all the stupid choices he makes, but you love the heart he has, and you want to see him succeed in his struggles. And I ultimately think this is another beautiful coming-of-age story told in a really interesting way. So again, for someone who loves Charles Dickens, loves David Copperfield, this is what I would recommend. For someone who likes more literary fiction and they want something a little shorter, I recommend So Long, See You Tomorrow by William Maxwell. So if you know someone who likes Stoner by John Williams or things like that, this is another good one. This is a story about a man who is remembering his childhood. He's now an old man, and his childhood was in the early 1900s. And in his childhood, the father of one of his friends at school was sent to jail for the murder of another man. And so this is kind of him reflecting on this family drama that happened of his friend at school and what that did to his friend and their family and the community. And it's really heart-wrenching to see what this specific family went through. And it also like plays with the idea of memory and regret. And as we grow older, you know, there are people in our lives, kids we grew up with, who were so close to us as friends when we were 7, 8, 10, 11 years old that we didn't really ever see again. And it's kind of weird when you think about it. And you reflect on, maybe I should have done something differently. Maybe I should have remained connected to them in some way. So regret, memory, community, a lot of things explored in a very short novel. And this packs a pretty strong emotional punch for how short it is. If there's someone in your life who loves music and culture, I recommend They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is a collection of essays. It's a nonfiction book, a collection of essays. And it's like half reflection on culture and music. And it's also like half memoir of Hanif's experience growing up in America as a black person. And so a lot of the systemic issues he struggled with coming from that background. And so I think there's a lot of social commentary baked into this, but through the lens of media and culture and music, which is really interesting. And I think if you're a millennial, or if you're looking to get a book for a millennial, especially one who loves music, this is a great book because it's going to break down and analyze songs from Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. It's going to look at Prince's famous Purple Rain concert for the halftime show in the mid-2000s and all sorts of other things. And it just takes things you might remember, whether it's a concert, a halftime show, a specific album from a band that you listened to as a teenager. And he has this amazing way of like commenting on that piece of art and bringing it back to you as if you were listening to it at 17 again, but also weaving in his life experience and his observations growing up in America. It's great. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, and so this feels like reading poetry in a lot of ways. All right, my camera just died in the middle of the last recommendation I was doing, so if the angle is a little different, that's why. The Wager by David Grann. I recommend this for any old man in your life, any older guy. This is good for grandpas, for dads, for uncles. most guys in general, this is a shipwreck story. And I need to be honest, I didn't finish this one. I got like halfway through it. It's good. I didn't stop reading it because it's not good. I get sidetracked a lot. And nonfiction is not as much my primary genre, but this is a really fascinating story. It's about a shipwreck that happens, and there's a bunch of twists and turns. There's like betrayal. This is a survival story, and I just, I think about my dad and my grandpa, and they love this kind of thing. When a ship gets wrecked and people are trying to survive, and it's awful living conditions, and people are, it's man versus nature and all this stuff. This story has that, but there's all, in true David Grann fashion, there's like additional layers to the story that you don't immediately realize. David Grann's the guy who wrote Killers of the Flower Moon, which is actually another great book. I did finish that one, and there's a movie. You might have seen the movie. That's another book where you have this historical account, and it's fascinating, and then as you get into it, there's like, it's like a good twist, except it's real. There's a twist that happens, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't see that coming, but it's something that happened in real life. This delivers that too. So, anyway, for the person in your life who loves nautical fiction, nonfiction, shipwrecks, again, grandpas, uncles, whatever, anybody could read this and enjoy this. I'm sure there are plenty of, people who aren't those things that like this, but I think this is a great gift for that particular demographic. For the manga or comic book reader in your life, I recommend Monstrous, written by Marjorie Liu and illustrated by Sana Takeda. This is a phenomenal graphic novel. It's an American graphic novel, but some of the art style feels a little bit like it could be from a manga, so I think it's a really good bridge between the two, honestly. Like, if you mostly read manga, this is kind of a good, like, Western graphic novel to read because it has some of those stylistic elements. And if you like more Western comics and you haven't read much manga, I mean, maybe this could get you into some stylistic things that could lead you down the road to manga. There's a lot of great mangas out there, too, which I'll make a video going over some of my favorite mangas and some of my favorite comics someday. But this is a phenomenal one. I don't hear talked about very often. The artwork's cool. The story's really interesting. Let me show you. Like, just look at this. This kind of reminds me a little bit of Shadow of the Colossus as well, the video game, just because there are these gigantic titans or colossi that are present in the story at times. So there's another demographic. If you know someone who loves Shadow of the Colossus, maybe this would be a good gift to get them. So those are my 12 recommendations for 12 different readers, but I have a bonus because I can't count. This is a children's book. If you want to get your kid or like a nephew or niece or someone into Lovecraftian eldritch horror, I recommend The Call of Cthulhu, Dr. Seuss style edition by R.J. Ivankovic. And this is basically just that. It's The Call of Cthulhu told as a children's story with Dr. Seuss style artwork. I thought this was totally hilarious. So yeah, if you want to give your kids just an irrevocable fear of the ocean and whatever beings might lurk beneath, then get them this, The Call of Cthulhu, Dr. Seuss Kids Book Edition. So there you have it. That is my 2025 book gifting guide. A lot of different great recommendations, many of which hopefully you haven't heard of. And I think this could match a wide array of different types of readers, and even people who aren't necessarily readers but might be willing to try a book. I think some of the books that I just went through are great entry points depending on the type of person. So let me know, have you read any of these? Have you recommended any of these to anybody? How did it go? And also drop in the comments, what is your favorite book for gifting? Thanks for watching.